So the White House just released the 5th anniversary January 6th timeline. We all know what happened January 6th. I remember where I was. You remember where you were when the Capitol building was overran by protesters and rioters trying to break in and literally kill politicians at our Capitol building, which was just mind-blowing at the time. And I don't think anybody's going to forget where they were when that happened. It's kind of like how the generation before me said they'll never forget where they were when 9/11 happened. That's like, I'm never going to forget where I was when January 6th happened. And as a result of this whole fiasco, this riots and people even dying and all this, a lot of people would end up being prosecuted and eventually pardoned for taking place at this riot/protest. Now, we're going to take a step back, though, and we want to look at the actual timeline, and we want to compare it to some of the things that actually happened. And so maybe this isn't the most in-depth historical analysis or anything like that, but we are going to be reading out the timeline to you guys here today and just showing you the revisionist history of this administration. And revisionist is not necessarily a good thing here, in the sense that we are literally trying to pervert what actually happened to make ourselves sound better. At least that's what Donald Trump is doing, to make himself sound better, right? So when I say ourselves, I'm referring to Trump, right? So this is a horrible, horrible thing here. I imagine this will be removed whenever the next president gets in office. But for the time being, you can see the absolute crazy ramblings of a madman in the White House. The man who's bombed 7 countries so far. I can't say it enough. The No New Wars president who's bombed 7 countries and literally kidnapped a sovereign president. So with that said here, we're going to read out the timeline here, and you guys can make up your own minds as to how absolutely insane this is. So starting off here, it says pre-January 6, 2021. President Trump invites Americans to D.C. President Trump invites patriotic Americans to Washington, D.C. on January 6 for a peaceful and historic protest against certifying the stolen 2020 election. He emphasizes standing up for the election integrity while calling for peaceful demonstration. Hundreds of thousands respond to the call to show support. So you can already see the language there. He's saying the stolen election. It's funny how the 2024 election wasn't a stolen, only the 2021. And then he's also like using some of those big buzzwords there that sort of resonate with a lot of the conservative crowd. It's like patriotic, right? Like you feel really patriotic towards your country, right? You feel that visceral urge, like I'm patriotic, right? Like I've been seeing some TikTok edits recently of Trump taking over Venezuela, and I won't lie, I'll be feeling patriotic sometimes watching him, right? So we all have that feeling of patriotism, even if we don't necessarily like the underlying policy that's associated with it. So that's the first thing there. Next up here, we're going to have the second time here. So at 12 to 1:15 p.m. on January 6th, President Trump is going to deliver a powerful speech, it says. Powerful speech. And it says, at the ellipse, President Trump speaks to hundreds of thousands of supporters, detailing evidence of election fraud and urging the crowd to march to the Capitol to, quote, peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. He stresses the need to fight for the country through strength and determination, explicitly calling for peaceful protest. The crowd responds with massive enthusiasm. Relatively interesting, right? You can just see like you're working that in. You're not necessarily just focused on the facts, and nor should you be sometimes when you're a historian, right? Sometimes you want to actually like paint a picture of what it would actually be like to be there, in that moment. As somebody who's literally a historian by, I guess trade. Like I talk about history all the time for a living. One of the things that you realize you want to try to not necessarily embellish it, but you want to make it sound interesting, right? So you're going to say, look, the crowd responds with massive enthusiasm, right? You're trying to make it you're trying to make your history come alive, right? So there's not necessarily anything too wrong, necessarily as much with the rhetoric, but you can tell it's probably just going a little bit too overboard. You can tell it's clearly in favor of one side here, which is, hey, look, I get it. You know what I'm saying? So we can let this one slide a little bit here. But one of the things that's funny here is it's like to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. Peacefully. We'll see how that goes. So we're moving on here from 1 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Following the president's speech, the massive crowd peacefully marches down the Constitution Avenue to the Capitol to protest the certification of the fraudulent election. The march is orderly and spirited, with flags, signs, and chants supporting President Donald Trump. Relatively interesting there. We have the word fraudulent. Interesting stuff here. So again, we're going down here. We can see here election integrity, right? On this one here, in the pre-January 6th, it says. Over here, we got election fraud in the next one. And then from 1 to 1:30, we got the protest certification of the fraudulent election, right? So you can see you're literally just straight up denying that he lost, which is funny because, obviously he says he didn't lose in 2024. So it's like, why are we contesting 2020? It's like, bro, you had it in the bag till COVID, but you fumbled so bloody badly. You deserve to lose that, no doubt. So I don't know. I just a little ridiculous here, a little crazy. And like, look, and this is coming from a liberal here. I'm definitely very liberal, but I've actually defended the January 6th protesters, right? Because I've said, look, if you have the president of the United States telling you the election is rigged, right, and that they literally stole an election, they undermined the democratic process, they're literally rigging fucking elections, right? And like, I'm the president, I know all this stuff about this. I'm literally trying to expose all these people who are literally rigging elections to you, my patriotic Americans. It's like, you have a duty to overthrow that government. Like, yes, you have a duty to do that. That's literally what the country was founded on. That is literally what the country was founded on, is that if the government becomes corrupt, you have the duty to overthrow it, right? And so, look, I sympathize with the January 6th protesters. I think we're all idiots kind of not for protesting in some regards, right? Now, granted, having said that, they clearly were in the wrong and they went overboard, right? But you can understand where people are coming from here. And just because you feel that you were not convinced by Trump's rhetoric and whatnot concerning this, that doesn't mean that necessarily other people won't be convinced by that. Because clearly millions of Americans were enamored with his speech and are enamored with his speech to this day. So one of the things that you cannot say is that they necessarily did not have that right to go over there, at least in some capacity there. And obviously, things go overboard, and that's when it crosses the line, because you're killing innocent people in some cases, right? Innocent people died that day. So obviously very, very bad. And you're trying to trash the Capitol, but you can understand where it's coming from. You know what I'm saying? That's what you have to understand. You have to place yourself in the shoes of other people, and you have to place yourself in the shoes of people who understand the founding documents of this country and recognize that when the government is being corrupt, you have the not only the right to overthrow it, but you have a duty to overthrow it as well. So the president of the United States is literally telling you the election's rigged. Look, I sympathize with those people to a large degree, right? So this is coming from somebody who is relatively sympathetic towards them, right? But to the president himself, I'm not sympathetic with him at all. I think I know for a fact he knows that he's lying. That or he's deluded enough with people in his ear, the little Rasputins, saying that he was actually the winner of these elections here. So crazy stuff. I don't know. That's just sort of how I take it so far. So with that said, here we're gonna have the fourth one here. It says Capitol Police response to escalated tensions. So Capitol Police aggressively fired tear gas, flashbangs, and rubber munitions into crowds of peaceful protesters, injuring many and deliberately escalating tensions. Video evidence shows officers inexplicably removing barricades, opening Capitol doors, and even waving attendees inside the building, actions that facilitate entry while simultaneously deploying violent force against others. These inconsistent and provocative tactics turned a peaceful demonstration into chaos. With that one, I can relatively understand where that's coming from here. There are, and I don't know about necessarily peaceful protesters. There's a lot that were not peaceful. So, again, but that's one of those word, that's one of those little word games, right, that we could play, right? It's like, yeah, okay, 97% of people were peaceful. It's like, but that 3% ruined it for everybody. It's like, okay, I'll give you it. Right. But one of the things that we have to recognize simultaneously is that some of what he's saying here is actually pretty accurate. I remember seeing videos myself with my own eyes. I'm not going to deny it here, of police literally waving people into the building, at least past barricades, I should say. Maybe not into the building, but past barricades. So look, you know what I'm saying? We'll give him this one. He'll take the win on this one. So he's lost on 3, but we'll give him the win on this one. And then we got the 5th one here. It says President Trump urges calm, and this is going to be from 2:24 to 4:17 p.m. So isn't it funny how literally the times are so bloody accurate here? This is probably just finding this dude's tweets online. It says, as events unfold, President Trump repeatedly calls for peace, tweeting support for law enforcement and releasing a video telling supporters go home in peace while reiterating love for them and election concerns. He consistently promotes nonviolence despite the attack on attendees and emotions running high. What I always find relatively interesting too is the fact that, he never pardoned these people until he got back into office. Dude, if you actually felt that they deserve that pardon, wouldn't you have gave them your first term? Unless he was just scared to death that it would actually harm him. Who knows? I don't know. I found that to be relatively interesting. But yeah, no, like, I don't know. Anyways, here we're going to move on. So here we go. Next up here, we're going to go leaked Pelosi video reveals security lapses. So this is going to be from 2:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. So we're going back a little bit. It says leaked footage captured by Nancy Pelosi's daughter showed the speaker in a rage during evacuation, furiously admitting, "I take responsibility for the catastrophic failure to pre-position National Guard troops despite President Trump's prior authorization and offers of 10,000 troops that were rejected. Pelosi repeatedly demands to know why security was so inadequate on her watch, exposing the deliberate refusal to accept offered protection and the ignored or delayed request for reinforcements." Wow. Okay, there's something right there. So one of the things here is that you're basically saying, look, like, I take responsibility for the, this failure to get these National Guards here, blah, 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 blah. That's one of the things that Trump has been pushing forward for quite some time now, is this narrative that, like, look, Nancy Pelosi is really, like, the one responsible here. The Democrats are the ones that are responsible for this. And it's like, no, actually not. No. So, like, Trump could have easily called in people to prevent this from happening. But you know what? At the end of the day, he did not do that. And, you can understand where he's coming from to some degree, right? Something that might just, boil down, or fizzle down by itself. He might just not want to ruin it here for everybody. Say, look, a couple people got to control it first. You're waiting a while. You don't want to ruin it. You don't want to look like the bad guy. You can understand where his mindset is coming from here, but then we also get the testimonies of other people here, like the like his drivers, for instance, which don't make that sound that good. I heard that he actually wanted to go down to the protest riots himself, the Capitol riots, which is relatively interesting. They stopped him from doing so, and I guess he was absolutely furious. But they were like, "Yeah, man, you're not about to go down there," which is kind of crazy because if you were the president of the United States, you'd think you just fire those people right away. And I suppose he probably could have. He just didn't think about it, which is ironic considering that this is the Apprentice guy, right? Who was his whole catchphrase was "You're fired," right? So I don't know. One thing I could tell you though is it's like they could have done something there. They could have probably ended this a little bit quicker. But you can understand the hesitation as to why he didn't do it. At least I certainly can. I can put myself into his shoes and say that I honestly understand that. Next up here, we got the Ashley Babbitt murdered in cold blood. Unarmed Air Force veteran and Trump supporter Ashley Babbitt is fatally shot by Capitol Police Lieutenant Michael Byrd without warning as she climbs through a broken window towards the Speaker's lobby. No weapon was found on her, and she posed no threat. Byrd faced no charges. 3 other Americans were also killed: Roseanne Boyland, Kevin Greason, and Benjamin Phillips. 0 law enforcement officers lost their lives. You're like, interesting stuff here. So we literally have a person die because of this riot here, and they were shot by the Capitol Police. And because they were shot by the Capitol Police, Trump's going to say, well, look, I mean, like, this is just a peaceful protester who's literally hopping through a broken window trying to get into the Speaker's lobby. Like, this is, man, now we're sort of grasping at straws here a little bit, man. Like, people, again, it's the crowd, dude. Like, people, you never know. I mean, people have been talking about the crowd for years. Gustave Le Bon. I was just reading that the other day. I haven't finished it yet. But the crowd is a crazy force, dude. You peer pressure, that collectivization makes you do crazy things. Maybe they did not have those violent intentions, but maybe they did. And as the Capitol Police, when people are screaming like death to Mike Pence and rushing the building, and you can see things like flashbangs going off, and just like the world is crazy here. You got all these people wearing like full balaclavas and ski masks and bandanas covering their face, trying to scale the walls, and literally they're carrying weapons on them. Like, yeah, you're probably going to fire back. And as the police, you can understand, how that's happening. You can understand, where the police are coming from here, shooting them. So to demonize the police, which is, funny, which is ironic because the conservatives are usually the ones defending the police. I found that to be relatively weird. Next up here, we got Mike Pence refuses to act. Vice President Mike Pence, who had the opportunity to return disputed electoral slates to state legislatures for review and declarification under the United States, or decertification under the United States Constitution, chooses not to exercise that power in an act of cowardice and sabotage. Instead, Pence presides over the certification of contested electors, undermining President Trump's efforts to address documented fraud and ending any chance to correct the election steal. Like, first of all, dude, like, Trump sued in, like, every single state and, like, lost in pretty much every single state concerning election fraud, and, like, almost every single court case was lost. And, like, even, like, I believe he won, like, a couple minor ones, but it's like, you know, it's completely irrelevant because you lost infinitely more than you won. And then Pence is here just saying, like, look, man, like, you know, I might be your vice president, bro, but, like, the gig is up, man. Like, I'm not going to steal an election for you. You know, he said, I got more pride than that. And props to Pence, man. We're all hard on Pence. I mean, I don't like Pence at all. But, you know, like, props to him for this, right? Like, he did the right thing here. So you can at least say he has some morals. Having said that, though, it's like just crazy. Look at that wording there. Like, this act of cowardice and sabotage. In an act of cowardice and sabotage. You're saying this about your former vice president. This dude's blood, he's lost it, man. He's absolutely lost it. Next up here, we got from 8 p.m. to 3:40 a.m. We got the stolen election is certified. It says after law enforcement clears the Capitol, Congress reconvenes late that night and certifies Joe Biden's electoral votes. Votes from battleground states marred by massive mail-in ballot fraud, hidden suitcases of ballots, exploding water pipes, voting machine irregularities, and unprecedented pandemic-era rule changes that bypass state legislatures. 2020 is considered the greatest election theft in U.S. history, with widespread fraud deliberately ignored by courts, officials, and the media. Oh boy, now he's not holding back. No punches are held back. Ladies and gentlemen, 1-2 Mayweather on behalf of Donald Trump. This is crazy. This man is just straight up putting forth that revisionist history here, saying that this is like just, you know, widely accepted as like the most, you know, stolen theft here in U.S. history for an election. Man, this is wild here. This is wild stuff. And, you know, I don't really have much to add to it here besides saying, again, he lost the majority of these court cases. And, like, yes, there's going to be some voter irregularities. Like, this is the country of 300 plus million people. If you don't think there's going to be some irregularities, you're an idiot. But those irregularities here are usually very small in nature. And so the idea that you could rig an entire election, right? An entire election is absolutely crazy. And you could say, okay, well, you know, Phillips, you don't got to rig an entire election. You could just rig like battleground states and all that stuff and try to, you know, tilt it over the edge. It's like, yeah, you probably could, but you also lost the majority of these court cases here. And so, you know, like, I understand, like, dude, I do sympathize. I think he actually genuinely believes that the election was stolen. But, you know, it's clear looking from like a third party that probably was not the case. Even if there was some corruption there. Let's be honest, this guy probably deserved to lose. I mean, look, the way he handled COVID was so bad that there's no way this dude did not lose. Like, I'm sorry, it was literally like impossible. And even when he recognized he messed up, it was already too late. So when he tried to go back and like give more stimulus checks and all that stuff, it was too late, right? He already lost, right? The game, the jig was up. He already lost. So he had to wait, you know, out that term where he lost and had to go back again the next time, which now he's going to say that it wasn't stolen. Right. And then that's what the Democrat actually in power, by the way. He's going to say that, you know, it wasn't stolen. So look, man, like, probably wasn't stolen then, was it? And, you know, I'm sympathetic to this man here. I've had experiences myself where I genuinely have seen corruption in the government. And I know that it was used against me to some degree here, particularly with the licensing system, you know, for you know, my state. And I recognize that. And I say, look, if they can screw me over, they could screw anybody over. But in the same breath, like, you have to recognize here that, you know, it's a little bit different to screw somebody over on like a license than it is to screw somebody over with respects to an entire federal election, the biggest one in the world, by the way. And so you're like, damn, like that's something, man. I don't know. Just the idea that this was rigged, to me, I can't see it. Even if there was some irregularities and people were trying to do so. And I have no doubt some people are trying to do so actively. I have no doubt. But does that really tilt the scales? And I would say the answer is no. And that was back before he won this last election. And I would say definitely not now. You know, so even if there was any doubt at all, which I didn't think that there was, but if there was, now I don't think you can say that. Next up here, we're going to have President Trump silenced. So post-January 6, 2021, despite his explicit calls for peaceful protests, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and other platforms collude to ban President Trump, citing incitement in a blatant act of election interference. J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Capital One, other major financial institutions debank President Trump and his family, closing accounts, freezing funds, and denying services in a ruthless campaign of financial persecution to destroy them politically and economically. Legacy media surpasses evidence of fraud. Ooh, how crazy is that? This is one thing that I actually do agree. I don't think people should generally be banned on social media because that's the public square. And if you get banned from the public square, you're relatively cooked. You're relatively cooked. I mean, there's really not much you can do. You literally silence somebody, right? You've literally sewn their mouth shut forever. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. Again, as somebody who's almost a free speech absolutist here with some exceptions, right? Like if I were at like a social media platform, right? Like if it was like extreme severe bullying, right? Or like, calls for like genocide or something absolutely insane, like extreme racism, like, yeah, you can understand that for sure. Like, obviously get them banned. But in the sense of a lot of, his comments, as crazy as they were, I don't necessarily think they warranted a ban. So at the time, I was against that. I didn't necessarily think that it warranted a ban, let alone a full ban. Even if you're going to ban it for a little bit, let alone a full ban. To be able to take the president of the United States off the out of the town square, I thought that was wild, absolutely wild. So you can understand when he says silence. Yeah, for sure. I'm sure, no doubt, he feels silence here. And so I genuinely do think that these were his experiences. But let's move on here. So we got a couple more. So we're gonna have the mass arrest of patriotic protesters. So it says the Biden DOJ launches a coordinated nationwide dragnet arresting over 1,500 January 6th attendees in pre-dawn raids. Many were for mere trespassing or parading. Hundreds were held as political prisoners for years in harsh conditions, denied speedy trials, and even given lengthy sentences in what is considered an unprecedented and diabolical weaponization of federal law enforcement against Trump supporters. At least 5 J6 defendants took their own life while facing prosecution. That's pretty freaking crazy, man. Yeah, no, I mean, if you want to paint it that way, yeah. It's the people who lose who don't get to write the history. The people who win get to write the history, which is what we're reading now, right? They get to write the history. And the people who won, obviously not the Trump supporters at that time, were the ones who got to write that history. And so they were the ones who got to see all those people arrested. And that's just how it works, man. That's how it works from a historical perspective. So they lost. I mean, like, had the founding fathers, lost to Great Britain, it's like they would have been labeled murderous sociopaths who go around tarring, feathering people and killing people and burning down houses. And so, like, yeah, like, whoever wins writes history, because nowadays we revere them. So think of it that way. But, little food for thought there. Next up here, we got January 6th Select Committee exposed. So Speaker Pelosi's handpicked January 6th Select Committee stacked with anti-Trump Democrats and 2 Rhinos, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. Why did he call them rhinos? Spent over 3 years and nearly $20 million in taxpayer funds on a propaganda spectacle to demonize President Trump and his supporters. They coached witnesses like Cassidy Hutchinson, leading to calls for perjury and witness tampering investigations against them, while withholding exculpatory evidence, deleting encrypted files, and ignoring security failures. So again, we got more and more accusations here. Just wild stuff here. Just calling people out constantly. Anti-Trump Democrats, right, is going at it here. You can see this, like, they're talking about propaganda. So as if this isn't propaganda, they're saying that's propaganda. Next up here, we got weaponized prosecutions target President Trump. So Biden prosecutors bring multiple indictments against President Trump over his legal election challenges, including January 6th related federal charges. FBI agents conducted an unprecedented raid on his Mar-a-Lago home, including searching through First Lady Melania Trump's private wardrobe and personal belongings. They targeted his loyal lawyers, aides, and associates with baseless charges, threatening decades-long prison sentences to pressure them into flipping with false testimony against him. Ooh, that's relatively interesting there. And again, they're saying, like, the unprecedented raid on Mar-a-Lago home, including searching through First Lady Melania's private wardrobe, personal belongings. So they're literally trying to appeal to your emotions right now. That's one of the things here. I believe it was we were looking at I was watching this podcast with a Roman and Greek historian, and they were talking about Cicero, how they're so good at speeches because they appeal to people's emotions, right? Like they'll walk around like a baby, for example. So they talk about like the props, and so you'll be like, look, like how could you ever find this man guilty when he has this precious little child? You want them to be without a father, right? So you're appealing to people's emotions here. But you're saying, oh my God, you're looking through the first lady's private wardrobe? That's freaking insane. But you're saying like baseless charges, right? And it's like, well, dude, like I'm pretty sure is this not when he was found to have all these like private documents and whatnot stashed away in Mar-a-Lago that he was not supposed to have access to? I don't know. I mean, relatively interesting. And like here's the thing, like documents to me, I could care less. But the dude was a former president, let him have his freaking documents, right? But the documents that were alleged nuclear codes. Oh my God. Now we're saying like that is now you can't have your fucking documents. You know what I'm saying? Like absolutely not. And we don't know what it is as the people. We just only hear the allegations, and God knows what the hell Trump was bragging about and whoever the hell heard. So yeah, like dude, like you can't do that, right? And you have to recognize that there needs to be some level of security here, for some of our most classified materials. And so who knows what he had here, because I don't believe this stuff even went to, obviously we can't even get like trials for this stuff. It's absolutely insane. And so, I don't know, or any real investigations or materials or whatnot. I mean, for God's sake, we can't even get the Epstein files. You think we're going to get this? Probably not. So anyways here, the FBI entrapment operation is exposed. So subsequent investigations, congressional testimony, DOJ admissions, and whistleblowers confirmed the FBI had at least 26 and likely dozens more confidential informants and assets embedded in the January 6th crowd. Figures like Ray Epps, who was caught on video repeatedly urging people to go into the Capitol, were charged only minimally. Democrats successfully flipped the narrative to brand peaceful protesters and insurrectionists while waging the true insurrection against a legitimate election. It's like, well, okay, well, bro, they were insurrectionists, man. Like, don't get it twisted here. Whether or not they won or lost, they were insurrectionists. But, like, I mean, I don't know what to tell you here. Like, you did lose, so, we're going to call you whatever we want to call you, I suppose. But, like a lot of them, again, it's those plays on words here. Most are peaceful protesters. A lot were not. And obviously it was remembered for those who were not peaceful protesters. Obviously, don't get it twisted here. And so, we are, people who are not necessarily always the best at, talking about numbers, right? I mean, if a few people do something, we're always going to blame those few people because negative things affect us more than the positive things do. There were a lot of positive peaceful protesters, there's no doubt. But there was also a lot of violent ones who were literally trying to go into the building and murder politicians. Like, that's a problem, bro. That's a problem. See, here's the thing. If you don't like them, you got to vote them out. Right, you can't just, if you want to try to stage like peaceful revolution or something, so look at like what happened in Berlin, right, in the Soviet Union, right, they peacefully destroy the Soviet Union, break down the Berlin Wall. Like this stuff happened like overnight, and it's like you start to bring peace back to the to the world to some degree, right? But you don't have to go around just murdering people for that. I mean, you can't do that, right? So you can sympathize with the idea that you need to overthrow the government. There needs to be some form of riot and whatnot. It's like, but the second you start calling for like the death of these politicians, trying to kill them, it's like, that's the issue, guys. It's like, I think that's what people are most upset with here. And so like, if you're a Trump supporter, you can try to understand that, right? So yeah, relatively interesting stuff there. But next up here, we got lawfare fails. President Trump prevails. Wow, that rhymes. Ha, he's a poet, and he didn't know it. But it says, despite relentless deep state efforts to imprison, bankrupt, and assassinate him, all designed to sabotage his political comeback through fabricated indictments, invasive raids, and rigged show trials, President Trump emerges triumphant, fueled by unbreakable resolve, the fierce loyalty of his courageous family, team, and patriotic Americans, and God's unmistakable grace. He delivers a landslide 2024 victory and reclaims the White House in the greatest comeback in American history. Man, bro, we can't have nothing, man. We can't have nothing. But look at this, bro. Dude's even dropping the word deep state. Deep state? Bro, you are the deep state. It says, despite relentless deep state efforts to imprison, bankrupt, assassinate him. Like, wait, well, hold on a minute. So you're saying that the person who tried to assassinate was you was a deep state asset? Hold on a second now. What are you not telling us? Because the last time I remember, we don't really have that much information on these people. Are you saying that he was a deep state asset? I don't know, man. I don't know. I'd like to hear more information about that. And we got imprisoned, bankrupt, for sure. No doubt they're trying to imprison him. No doubt they were trying to bankrupt him. I have no doubt about that, right? But bankrupt's probably not even the right word here. It's probably more like, destroy his life as best they can, and they won't want to be associated with him. Debanking is one of the craziest things in the world to me. I don't think the banks should be allowed to do that, but for some reason they are. I don't think they should be allowed to at all. Again, for some reason they are. I've seen lots and lots of people on the internet before who talking about how they've been debanked, and overnight, like their whole life, they could be banned on every social media platform, debanked, and it's like, where the hell do I go now? You know what I'm saying? Like, they just can ruin your life in 2 seconds, right? It's just like what China does, right? In China, you'll have situations where people lose their social credit and you're just done for. You're donezo, man, and there's no coming back. Just look at Nick Fuentes, for example. Obviously, the guy's not a shining star here of views that we should be emulating, but he was banned on like literally every platform. And just recently, I believe he got back on Spotify somehow, and then they immediately took him off the next day when he became #1 on Spotify. So like, you're cooked, bro. Once they're on to you, you're done for. And so I don't know. This is relatively interesting, obviously very revisionist here. You can see they came with a motive, and they portrayed that motive very well. Right? He's outright asserting the election was stolen, and like, that's election stolen. I was robbed. I'm gonna memorialize that for all of time. And so that's what he's saying, and that's what he honestly believes in here. But I would not necessarily paint that as fact. All right, so that's how I look at it here. This is more like a diary to me than it is an actual account of the events. Does that make sense? Right. So hopefully you guys can try to understand that here. When I teach historical perspectives to people, I try to put yourself in the shoes of people that you really would not like, right, and just try to recognize where they're coming from. And I think that we have to do that with the president in this case. As wrong as he is, and as bad as this may be, and as crazy level of propaganda this may be, sometimes you gotta take a step back and recognize that this is probably actually what he believes in. And so we're dealing with somebody who's extremely deluded, and has just so far gone at this point. This is nothing. I mean, this is just a little timeline here that he put together, and he can believe whatever the hell he wants to believe, because he did lose that election, and now he is back in office. So I guess he can do whatever the hell he wants with his website. But we got to be judging this man more on policy, as opposed to his delusions, because maybe he's deluded, but he has a good policy. But right now, horrible policy, probably going to start a third world war here, and he's relatively deluded. So we need to I don't know, watch, guys. We need to start voting people out. we need to watch here, because this reads like a diary to me. I think he genuinely feels this way, which is rare, because I don't think you get a glimpse into Trump too often. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking things. But what I will say here is that it's a little bit of analysis, nothing too in-depth, but I just wanted to read it to you guys because I found it to be relatively interesting. And so with that said, hopefully you guys did enjoy the video here today. Try to get us to 500 subscribers. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I'm Dr. Ian Phillips, and we'll talk to you later. Peace.